Building Your Tech Skills with Ben Mustall-Rose, Sydney May, John Paul Anderson and Matt Johnson. Tell us who you are, what you do and why tech skills are so important to you.
Hello, yes, my name's John Paul. I work for a company called Senclude Limited. We've been providing support in and around the workplace and in education for around 20 years now. A lot of what I do is mostly focused around assistive technology, but thereon how to take advantage of that both as perhaps a student in schools, colleges or university, but also then transitioning into the labour market and how you effectively manage that need relative to either of those expectations. Yeah, and it's a wonderful area to work in. I have to say, I'm very fortunate to be able to work in this area as well.
Yeah, sounds really, really interesting. We'll be coming back to you a little later. And last but by no means least, we have Sydney. Hey, Sydney.
Hello, lovely to see everybody here. Yeah, as Ben said, my name is Sydney. I work for Look UK and another local sight loss charity where I'm based down in Brighton. I'm a qualified life coach and a mentor, and I also work in assistive tech training. I have no sight myself, and I'm a big user of assistive tech, obviously. Well, I say obviously, maybe not obviously. I think the reason that why I am so passionate about it is because I use it myself so much, and it aids my independence in a massive way, and I'm going to talk about that more in this session. But I feel there is so much that I do independently which I would either not be able to do or would be much harder if I wasn't really good with the tech. So I live by myself. I use tech for a lot of things.
We're going to dive into that in a bit more detail now. Actually, Sydney, I'd like to sort of strip it back to the basics for a moment or two, if we could. Can I ask you what tech skills we should be learning at school, and what tech should we be learning to use as well in terms of assistive tech?
So I do a lot of work in schools. A lot of the assistive tech training I do is some even primary school age, and a lot of secondary. But we tend to start really early, and the thing we start with is touch typing. And I believe this is a really fundamental skill. It was not a skill designed for people that can't see, but obviously the big point of touch typing is that you are supposed to be able to do it without looking at the keyboard. It's all about learning where all your letters are, being able to do it without looking. And if you learn to do it properly, you'll be able to type 10 times faster than the average person who can't touch type, or 10 times faster than the average person who's writing. So I think it's a way of actually putting yourself at potentially an advantage over sighted peers as opposed to a disadvantage. You'll be working potentially faster, not slower. And it's not just typing, it's not just being able to type words in a document or an email. It's also then to be able to use keyboard shortcuts. If you're a screen reader user, you won't use the mouse, you'll just be using the keyboard. And if you know where all your letters are, you'll immediately, if you need to do Control S to save, for example, you're going to be so much faster if you know already where S is. And you don't have to look for it. So I've started touch typing with children kind of year 3, age sort of 6, 7, 8, because the earlier the better. And I think this is one of those that if you can learn this at a really young age and you're not trying to learn to touch type while trying to also do your GCSEs, for example, you're going to be, like I say, at a massive advantage.
Well, lots of great software suggestions there, but are there physical pieces of equipment that we should be looking into learning as well, perhaps?
I think especially a lot of teenagers I work with are really keen on using their iPhones and tablets because I think they're cooler and they're what everybody's using. And I always emphasize we need to know how to use computers. We need to know how to use laptops. And that is because, when you get in a work situation, in an office situation, you're going to need to know how to use a computer and not just a tablet. A tablet or a phone, it's a portable solution. It's a way to check on your emails on the train or when you're out and about. But computer skills are absolutely fundamental.
We've touched a little bit on the accessibility angle of this already, but would you say there are some mainstream packages, non-blinded specific ones that we should be looking at as well, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, I think your classic, Microsoft Office suite, you need to be able to use Outlook, emails. I always say to people, Outlook as an email app is so much more accessible than trying to use it via the web. If anybody visually impaired has tried to use email via the web app, they're not designed to be fantastically accessible. Whereas using Outlook, you can use shortcuts, you can get around it. It's so much easier. I wanted to mention differences between Mac and Windows. Most workplaces will use a Windows system. Mac has its uses. It depends what line of work you're in, but generally you're going to look at Windows and screen readers. I wanted to mention there's a touch typing, just touching back on touch typing, there is a free online tool for learning called Doorway Online, which is completely free, and it has an option to talk back at you. It's not designed for people that can't see, but it is usable.
I definitely feel your pain about trying to use Outlook on the web. It's not
horrible.
Great. Yeah. So we all know as blind people that self-advocacy is important, but are there ways that can help you with your tech skills as well, do you think?
People will assume that they know what you need, and they won't necessarily know what you need. I think you've got to make it your business to work out what you need so you can tell people. So I did a lot of self-teaching with tech. You won't always have access to an assistive tech specialist. I had some basic teaching, but I did make it my business to learn a lot of the tech that I wanted to know how to use. I kind of went, right, I want to know how to do that, so I'm going to need to learn how to do it. And I think that's really important. And I think it's worth saying, even if a job doesn't center around technology, I think it's safe to assume that tech, Matthew touched on it, tech is everywhere. We need to use it. You basically need to know how to use a computer in any job. And so I think it's vital.
Thanks for that, Sydney. Some great stuff there, and I'm sure there'll be lots of questions about that later. We're going to come to John Paul next. John, first things first, I sort of touched on this a little bit with Sydney, but can I ask you once again what kind of tech people should be looking at learning in school or college or university to get them workplace ready, and maybe with a bit more of a focus on people who use magnification as well as or instead of speech, perhaps?
Thanks for the question. I just want to build on what Sydney was saying, touch typing, even with some sight and you're going to use magnification is just a fundamental, really. And I think it supports the use of magnification in that you can assign your computer, whether that's a Mac or the PC platform, to track the cursor as it moves around the screen. So as you're typing, you can follow the active cursors as the letter appears. So if you're not using text to speech and you're able to visually see the screen and the characters you're inputting, the view follows that. So I would say having good keyboard skills and being able to maneuver around a keyboard quite well helps the area of vision that you have on the screen maneuver with wherever it is you want to be, switching between applications, for example, going from a web to the Word document. So I would say, yeah, keyboard skills, absolutely fundamental to begin with. In terms of the types of magnification, I would say, I think you kind of need to really dig deep into the settings on each. All magnification programs have their pros and cons. I would say none of them are perfect, but some of them have more enriched features than others. So, for example, I would say there are certain freewares that have great magnification. However, I find them only useful up to a certain level of magnification before they start to distort and pixelate, because they don't have the right types of technologies embedded into them to be able to do a thing called font smoothing or really keep the display and the clarity of the items that you're looking at. I think you need to decide on the types of color schemes you like to use and being able to to change and switch them relative to use. And I think with in regards to magnification, I think it always circles back to a thing called case use. And I say this because the case use within schools or in the workplace can change. You know, for example, you could be at the desk in a portable working environment where you're not expected to get up and maneuver around a lot. So in those instances, a desktop PC or a video magnifier that's static and put in place and or linked to your PC could be a very good solution in that instance for accessing printed materials. However, if you have to move around, then you need perhaps more of a portable solution and or then maybe a laptop to work with those products, although some of those video magnification products are standalone products all by their own right. But what you sacrifice with portability, I think you give away in terms of real estate and viewable screen area. Now, for those that perhaps don't know, with magnification, the higher the magnification, the more of a loss of screen you get. And I think the larger the screen, this kind of compensates for that loss in a way, because so you can use less magnification on a bigger screen and get the same results, but on a smaller screen, you need more magnification. And again, it's somewhat more focused. So there's a more loss of real estate in that respect of the viewable area. And then you've got powered and non-powered instances. Where are you going to be? How much power do you need? You need a wonderful power bank to perhaps support you throughout the day. You know, I know manufacturers boast these wonderful times of, you know, ours will do 900 hours of battery life. Or, yeah, I know it's a bit ridiculous, but you know, and in real case use, you tend to get a good solid 3 to 4 hours out of a laptop, I would say, when you're running a lot of tech. Physical items such as handheld magnifiers, you can use. So, for example, like myself, I have a type of glasses frame made that allows me to combine a head-walled set of magnifiers with handheld magnifiers. So I get that flexibility of large magnification without having to handhold too many objects. And or with working with magnification on a computer, I can put the magnifying lenses on my head and compensate with varied magnification in those instances as well. So I think it's about kind of being a bit experimental, and I would strongly recommend go to some of the tech shows around the UK where possible to look at the types of options and look at how you might be able to merge them together and really think about your case use. And I think this is an area I think where educators and people in the workplace fall down where they give their advice. I think they like to give really strong advice, but I don't think they analyze the entirety of the case use and the expectation that the individual has to use throughout the day. And again, in terms of differentiation, how much can be differentiated? So things can be made accessible. Can they be printed in large print? Can they be made afforded digitally in accessible formats? And which brings me on to a point I think in the workplace and in the educational environment, particularly, the word accessibility has been hijacked a little bit. They mean it's just you have access to, rather than accessibility in the terms of differentiation. So it will interact with assistive technologies. So I think it's not just us as users, as tech. I think there has to be a joined up conversation with the organizations at which, and the IT teams in particular as well, at which you wish to use your technology.
Thanks for that, John. Loads of great stuff to consider there. We've got a real treat for you next. We're now going to hear from Orr, who has very kindly recorded us a video about what she does and some of the tech that she uses to help her do it. So let's have a watch of this now.
I'm Orr, I'm 25, and I'm a PhD student doing immunology. I'm a magnification tech user. So as part of my work, I work in a lab and I work on the human immune system. And part of that is that I have to manipulate a lot of small amounts of liquid. So what tech do I use for that? The most important piece of kit I use are these pair of glasses, which have a telescope on one eye and my normal prescription on the other eye. This allows me to zoom in onto a specific thing that I'm doing, hands-free, while still keeping a decent visual field and awareness of what's going on around me with my other eye. I couldn't do anything without these glasses, as they allow me to do very fine work. For For example, I can also take them home and use them for to sew a button on, for example. What tech did I use at uni? At uni, I was completely paperless, and I used a laptop as well as a portable CCTV called the MagniLink that I used to zoom in on the board or PowerPoint presentation. How did self-advocacy help me in this? I advocated for myself by asking for all my materials electronically, which allowed me to remain paperless, and also sometimes asked lecturers to send me the PowerPoint presentations in advance so I could access them on my own computer screen. At what age did I go paperless? I went paperless at age 12 when I started year 7. And part of that was learning general IT skills and touch typing. Both of those were really important for me, as they allowed me to keep up at school in a paperless format and use my tech efficiently and without a conscious effort. What other tech could I not be without? My favorite piece of tech is my handheld monocular. I also sometimes use my phone camera instead. I've had my monocular since a very young age, and one of the very important things was that I was taught to use it properly at a young age, which means that I can now use it very efficiently, comfortably, and without conscious effort. And another perk of that was that when I started using my lab glasses, it was very easy for me to adjust, as they're quite similar to using a monocular.
Wow, well, I mean, that was incredible. Don't those glasses sound really, really interesting as well? I'm pretty sure that's not just because I'm a geek that I'm interested in those. So we're going to bring Matt Johnson in now. Hi, Matt.
Morning.
So we've had lots of sort of theoretical advice at the moment, but I'm really interested in getting your perspective as someone who works with tech, but not necessarily in tech.
Yeah.
And I gather that things like being self-driven, able to troubleshoot, and being better than sighted people at tech are all things that you find quite important.
100%. So there are a couple of things at sort of every step of the employment / the application / employment process, right? Which you need to think about and you think about in advance. So firstly, let's talk about actually applying. When you apply for jobs, there's two ways you typically would do it in most situations, right? You would have either an application portal, an online application portal. Instantly, you think web skills, all right? You have to be able to really get into the web and be able to use it to a pretty high level. Because if you don't know how to use forms mode, for example, on a web page, you've got to choose your address, you've got to choose the position, you've got to do 1,000 different things on web application portals, right? Everyone uses these nowadays. So the process there, you have to have really solid web skills, or you end up submitting a CV. So one, you have to know how to submit the CV, again, web skills. And two, you have to make sure the CV is properly formatted and correct in terms of what the employer is wanting to see, because, they're going to see 100 of these. You do not want yours to stand out in a bad way. So if you're pasting and, cutting from different places, do the fonts line up? Does the indentation line up? I have worked on this extensively, and sometimes I'll get someone to just cast an eye over it who can actually cast an eye over it. So in any case, your ability to format properly and use Word, because it's going to be Word, right? Let's be clear, is absolutely essential. So you get the interview. All right, then what? Most of the time nowadays, your first interview is going to be virtual. Right? They're doing that more and more these days. And so you're going to need to make sure, do you have Teams? Do you have Zoom? Do they work? Does your camera work? Does your microphone work? Does your tech work? Can you find the mute button? Just memorize the shortcut for the mute button. Seriously, you're going to need it. Because you're halfway through an interview and the dog starts barking or the doorbell goes. I have experienced all of this. So, just learn how to get in, learn how to leave. Make sure on the day you do not have an access problem as the first impression you give to a panel of interviewers. It's not a good look. And it's totally avoidable, right? Even WebEx is usable with a bit of elbow grease. So, virtual interviews, get the tech right. All right. So when you are in the job, Well, actually, when you're in the interview and then in the job, the thing that you have to keep in mind, and it helps to sort of put yourself in the shoes of the employer. The employer, your manager, is thinking, are you going to be more of a problem to me than the 10 other people I'm managing? Are you going to, in some cases, directly be making me money, right? And so the way that you present in the interview, is super important. And from a tech angle, what a lot of employers are going to want to ask, and sometimes don't dare ask, is, how do you do the job? I don't know how a screen reader works. I've never heard of a blind person being able to do a job before. And so it's sometimes helpful to even preempt them a little bit in the interview. If you do it very gently and you don't make a thing out of it, I typically have done this by saying, look, at the end of the interview, they obviously ask you, do you have any questions? I always say, well, before I ask some questions, I wanted to open to allow you guys to ask questions about like how the job works, how I would do the job from a visually impaired perspective, and I'll open that door for them. And so many interviewers have said, oh, I'm really glad you did that because I was super curious. And it's not a negative thing to be curious if you've never worked with a blind person before. That's not a bad thing. If it's handled with sensitivity on both sides, it can actually leave the employer with a really good impression of you, as a potential employee, because you don't want to leave an interview. You don't want to leave the interview with, the employer still having question marks around your ability, right? So it's better to lock them up. So you get in the job. Then what? There's going to be a couple of things that will almost certainly come up. So much stuff to cover. Scripting. By the way, this is going to be Windows centric. If you're a Mac user, use a Mac at home, learn how to use Windows in a work environment. There aren't many work environments that use Mac at all. Just get onto Windows and JAWS. Scripting. There's a lot of software, even in the workplace environment, that isn't natively accessible, right? And you're going to want the ability to get it what's called scripted. So these are private companies that Access to Work will cover and pay for their expertise to come in, and they will basically build a bridge between that inaccessible software and JAWS to make sure that you can use those things. And it's generally at no cost to the employer. So scripting is super important, but it's on you to know about those things. You have to know that scripting is possible. You have to know who to get, by the way, because some scripters are way better than others. And there are some you absolutely should not use that Access to Work will push you towards. And there are all of these things, but the point here is to say, okay, as a blind employee, I know what I need here. And I need to be able to have a conversation with the tech guys in the organization, with the HR people, with Access to Work, and with a potential scripting partner to bring all of those things together into one accessible solution for you to do the job. So it's a lot about you knowing what you need and doing the research and having the contacts and knowing who to ask, and pushing people, because your employer is going to be reliant on you.
Questions.
What, in your opinion, is the best magnification package overall?
I personally am a big fan of Fusion. They're not sponsoring this, and for me to say this, but I like the JAWS screen reader packaged up with the ZoomText magnifier. I just find that works for me because I like text to speech, even though I am a magnification user as well. I often just like to not have to rely on any magnification and work with text to speech as well. But again, that's in the case use and the types of products and softwares that I use and interact with on a day-to-day basis. Plus, I like to sometimes work in dual mode monitors, and that software gives me the flexibility of different levels of magnification on both monitors, which is one of the features that the premium types of magnification software such as Supernova and Fusion and ZoomText do allow.
Great. So we had a question in the chat just about Dolphin there. So for anyone who isn't aware, Dolphin are an assistive technology company and they make Supernova. So we've had a question in the chat about scripting, and I know Matt's already answered that, but Matt, for anyone who isn't keeping up with the chat, just in a nutshell, could you give us an idea? Can scripting make everything accessible with JAWS?
Yeah, it varies. So the idea here with scripting is it can only do what the screen exposes to the screen reader is the technical answer. The non-technical answer is essentially is it can improve things, right? There are some software packages it simply can't touch, and you know, and there are a lot of problems with that and around cloud-based packages and all the rest of that fun stuff. But scripting in most situations will give you enough access that you can, you know, get the job done, because at the end of the day that's the focus, right? If the focus is being able to do the job they hire you for, and so in a lot of cases scripting will be enough. Worth also noting that good scripters will have seen Blue Prism. I've never seen Blue Prism, Abdul. I don't know it. Ask Blazy, blazy.co.uk. Get in touch with them. They will know. What I was about to say actually connects to that. Good scripters will know, you know, and will have dealt with most of the main software packages used by a lot of commercial organizations. You know, they will have seen this before. And so most of the time you go, oh, well, we've got this. And they say, oh, well, we've already built an access solution for 90% of what you already need. So bang, we're not having to reinvent the wheel. And that saves you time. It saves money, which is good for access to work, because, you know, they don't ever want to pay for anything. And, you know, so choose your scripter wisely. Again, I tend to go for Blazy as a scripting solution, because they're the ones who actually know what they're doing.
Yeah, so really quick, because I did have an experience with this, and we actually used Blazy. I got a job at the police in the call center, non-emergency call center, and the software they were using actually could not be made accessible with JAWS. And as Matthew said, that does happen. It's quite rare, and they would have had to, I think it was just old. So I think the more up-to-date things are these days, the better. But yeah, they actually had to offer me a different job in a slightly different department, because that was a program that Blazy could make a script for.
Thank you to everyone. Thank you to the panel for some incredible advice there.